What is up, guys? We're back again, but today we're not working on any of my cars. We're going to be working on Christian's chalkboard M42 E30, and today we're going to be showing you guys how to swap out a differential. Christian had a 4:10 ratio open differential, and it started making some weird noises, so he decided to swap it out for a 293 limited slip that we just had laying around, which isn't the most ideal ratio for an M42, just because it's a very low ratio, it's very slow, it has no acceleration, and it's very tough in an M42 motor. It's good for gas mileage, but it's not good for what he needs. So he ended up finding another 410 open diff. So we're gonna go swap out the 293 limited slip and throw in the 410. And yeah. So far, we just have the car jacked up on jack stands. We jacked it up from the differential. That diff in there has a Garagistic poly diff bushing, which I highly recommend. And he wants to swap that over to this diff. And you could either like swap out the diff covers if it's already installed, but we're trying to take off this OEM diff bushing because he likes the condition of this diff cover more than the one in there, because that one is like a little beat up. Yeah, so we're gonna try to take this out, and you could do it with the press, but we're gonna try to do it with a hammer and like a chisel type thing. So yeah. So the tactic here is we are just bending in the outer race, I think that's what you would call it, the aluminum outer piece of the OEM bushing, so that it deforms, and then that'll give it wiggle room to slide out. So it looks like it's coming out. That's a sharp flathead. Yeah. Ooh, there it is, mission success. So you don't really need a press to do this. And I think it's even easier if it's like an old bushing, just because there's not as much rubber and this piece can like go inwards, as long as this isn't seized. But anyways, it's all out. I guess you could sand this to make it smoother, to make it easier for the poly bushing to go in. But I'm pretty sure it'll go in like this. So now it's actually time to start pulling out this diff. So let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, so we're under the car now, and first step to get this diff out is to disconnect the axles. They can either be a torque socket or like an Allen key hex socket that you need to get it out. So the other thing is, in order to break them loose, you have to pull the e-brake up so that the axles don't move when you try to spin it. And then in order to reach the other ones all around it, because there's around, I think there's 6 bolts, you have to take off the e-brake, spin the wheel to move the axle so you can access the other bolts. So once you get those 6 off, then you can start working on the actual 4 bolts that hold the diff on, or you can also take off the drive shaft, whichever one you want to do first. Probably the drive shaft, actually. So the drive shaft takes 4 17mm nuts, and that's pretty straightforward. You might need to do the same thing and take off the e-brake, spin the drive shaft, and then lock it when you can access the other bolts. After you take off the drive shaft, you can also then take off the bolt and nut at the diff bushing, which is a 19 on both sides. And then the hardest part would be taking off the top 4 bolts, which are also 19s. And you have to use a wrench to get 2 hidden bolts on top of the back side, and then there's also 2 that fit right over here. You can see it just about there. Those 2 you can fit a socket, but the top 2 up here you have to use a wrench, and those are 19s as well. Yeah, there you go. Shit, dude, you really need to replace your axle boots. Your axles shouldn't do that, or it shouldn't be broken like that. The boot. Alright, what's next? Here we go. Oh man, your wheels are so nice. You gotta polish these, boys. Oh, dude, I've been wanting to polish this. I want to see this thing shine. There you go. You got it? Nice. Alright, I think we're gonna keep it on the jack so that it carries the weight when we remove the top bolts. Luckily, we have diff studs on here, so when we installed this diff, last time we installed the Garagistic Diff studs, and that makes it so it uses a stud and a nut so that it's easier to line up to the subframe when you're installing it, and it's also easy to remove because you don't have that constant tension on the bolt when you're, you know, taking it off from the subframe. Highly recommend it. It's so worth the money. Even if you don't think you're going to take off the diff, you might as well just install the diff studs, because when that does happen where you do need to take off the diff, or if you want to change ratios, it just makes it like a million times easier. And it also makes it way easier to install, so even if you're not going to take it out, it'll be easier to put the diff back in. Alright, time to lower this thing out. Ready? Speed sensor.
Break that.
Out of the car. Alright, if you don't know what diff you have, what ratio, one way to find out is you mark. Well, first we put this flange that goes to the drive shaft, we put a mark in the center right here, and then we put another corresponding mark to like the actual body of the diff. So one's right here, you can barely see it because we didn't really have a bright colored Sharpie, but one's right here, one's right there. And then without moving it, you also make a mark on one of the output shafts that go to the axles, and we marked it, same thing, one on the spinning part and then one on the actual body of the diff. So what you would do is you would then rotate this one rotation at a time, one full rotation. So that's one right there, and then you have to just keep track of how many turns it takes to do this in order to get back on the mark. So that was one full rotation. So that's two, and then as you can tell, it's still not lined up or still visible, but he's gonna turn it again. And then there is the marker right there. And he just finished his almost full third rotation. So it took him about 2 and almost 3 rotations in order to get back to that mark. So that means that this is like around 293, or around like a 29, and which we can confirm because we actually know that this one's a 293. So pretty much the whole thing about this is however amount of turns this takes to make this go one full rotation is what ratio your diff is. So if this took a little over 4 turns to spin in order to make that spin one rotation, that means it's maybe a 410 or a 423 or 427, whatever diff they make. But yeah, so that's how you can figure out your diff ratio on I'm guessing any car, but
yeah, I feel like that's how it would be for any car.
Yeah, but I'm not a mechanic and I only know E30s, so we didn't know what diff that was when we bought it, or when Christian was given it actually. So we did that to that diff, and that's how we found out it was like a 410-ish. And this is only if your diff doesn't have the tag on the back. Oh, where is it?
On this one.
Yeah, there's no tag on this, but normally there's a tag on the back that has a like a metal tag that has the ratio on it, and if it has an S on top like this, that means it's a limited slip, but it also says on the tag too. But that one came with a weird tag that just had a random set of numbers, and then this one I think just got removed. Alright, anyways, it's time to install the new diff. Well, actually, let's swap over the diff bushing because this one has the Garagistic Diff bushing on it. So we're gonna take out that and install it in the other diff. So you'll just see how easy it is to install a Garagistic Diff bushing, I guess. It's already coming out, and you like barely put in any effort. Yep, and it only goes in one side, and it has a lip to stop it from going in too far. Oh shit, what's that? Just make like a fart noise. Hammer-handed.
Hammer-fisted. It's actually working.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. That exact fitment. There you go.
No, that wasn't bad.
Yeah.
That wasn't bad.
That wasn't bad at all. And if you're ever worried about that coming out, you shouldn't, because the diff, the way you install it is like there's two like little ears that come out from of the chassis of the car, and then it clamps the actual diff bushing together, so there's no way it can, you know, fall out either way. There you go. That was super fast. Time to install this diff. These are the diff studs that you get from Garagistic, and they come with all the nuts as well, you know, just regular like 17mm nuts. So as you can see, there's that little section right there that has no threads. The side with less threads will go into where the bolts go, so like right here, right there, and then right here and over there. And then the subframe has, you know, little holes that these will slide through, and then you just put the nut on top. And this makes it drastically easier to install and uninstall your diff. So just make sure you tighten it down with the correct Allen socket. And it is a 7/32 Allen. I guess you could use blue Loctite to make sure that these don't back themselves out, but yeah, so we're gonna go install these diff studs and throw the diff back in. Alright, now we got all the diff studs on. Time to throw back on the jack and install it. Let's do it. Alright, so we just lined up the diff bushings, and the first thing you really need to do is actually line up the drive shaft so that you can push the whole diff forward more, and line up the studs. And the studs, as you can kind of tell, they are now lined up with the holes. So you can see the front one's lined up, and then the back one is also lined up. And then I guess the diff bushing is actually the last thing you want to bolt up, I guess. We're gonna put nuts on all the drive shaft bolts and those studs, then jack it up, tighten it, and then get the diff bushing, and it should be good. I know. And I can thread it all the way, almost. Well, with the bolt, there's normally tension if you don't have it perfectly aligned. But since the studs do the hard aligning work for you, you just easily turn that by hand. Same thing for the top. Alright, so I had to go for a little bit, but while I was gone, Christian pretty much finished up the install of the new diff. How was it? Everything looks good?
Yeah, everything's great. Just gotta tighten my zip ties, but yeah, everything's good.
Alright, dope.
Now we just gotta test drive it and hope that it doesn't whine or anything. Because I'm not doing this again.
Yeah. Alright, let's do it. The zip tie. You're good. I think you can just keep going. Man, the life you signed up for. Yeah, that wasn't that bad. Oh wow. Things. Let's see what this is like. Oh. Is it?
That's a 410.
It's a 410 for sure?